Airbnb promised a 10-year revolution, but cracks appeared in 2020. Bookings fell, profits plunged, and the worst part wasn't the numbers. If you look at Airbnb as a company, you'll see a financial story with ups and downs. But if you look at Airbnb as an experience, you'll see this is a collective disillusionment. Back then, stepping into an Airbnb was like opening a gift. You were excited, but it was the good kind of excitement like, I wonder how beautiful the balcony view will be. But now, a lot of people stand at the door like they're opening Pandora's box. The suspense is still there, but it has changed color. Will the keypad code work? Will the door jam? Is it actually clean inside? Is something waiting for me? Something I didn't pay to receive? Before we go on, I want you to answer a simple question. If you had to use one word to describe your most recent Airbnb experience, what would it be? Leave a comment right below. Just one word is fine. Because sometimes, one word can say what an entire system is deliberately refusing to hear. In this video, we'll redraw the full picture, from the early day miracle to an empire out of control, where scale, fees, rules, and irresponsibility grind down the most precious thing in hospitality. In 2008, the recession strangled wallets. People relearned how to tighten their belts, and travel suddenly became a luxury measured dollar by dollar. In that atmosphere, an idea that sounded like a joke found its most fertile ground. When people no longer wanted to pay for glamour, they were willing to trade it off for a temporary place to sleep for the night.
3 guys in San Francisco landed right in that scene. They couldn't afford the rent. They bought 3 air mattresses, laid them out in the living room, and rented out sleeping space.
The original name sounded like something blurted out in desperation: Air Mattress and Breakfast. It wasn't a brand polished by a boardroom, but a down-to-earth improvisation. Yet that very plainness created a sense of authenticity. And authenticity is incredibly rare in a market that's used to selling packaged experiences. While hotels were still operating like rigid pricing machines, they offered a softer escape. Living rooms, spare rooms, small apartments, places where ordinary people could turn extra space into money. In the early days, it was unbelievably cheap. A place to sleep in someone's living room could be so inexpensive that it felt like you were slipping past the travel industry's pricing system, as if you'd found a side entrance behind the building. After just about 2 years, the platform had surpassed more than 1 million bookings. That number wasn't just big for show, it was equivalent to filling roughly 2,700 mid-sized hotels for an entire year. By 2012, bookings had surged to around 12 million, like a machine that had just finished starting up and then blasted straight onto the highway without looking back. Investment money poured in right in step with that growth, as if the market were betting on the future of travel. From about $7 million in 2010, the funding rounds ballooned one after another: 100 million, then 200 million, and then the $1 billion milestone in 2016. At massive events, Airbnb stepped into the spotlight as a real challenger. The 2014 World Cup in Rio was a golden era showcase. More than 100,000 guests used Airbnb. When hotels ran out of rooms and prices soared, Airbnb showed up like a pressure release valve for the entire city, giving users the feeling they were winning the game, not getting drained by the hotel system, still having a place to stay, and even having a kitchen, a living room, a real life. In its best days, Airbnb's core value was easy to love and easy to believe. 40 to 60% cheaper than hotels, fewer shocking fees, and most importantly, the feeling of being welcomed like a real guest, not a booking code. You walked into an apartment, saw a kitchen, saw a sofa, saw the traces of everyday life, and in an economy growing colder by the day, that feeling of "I belong here" became the best-selling commodity. But it was right here that the seeds of the tragedy were already planted. At first, you reassured yourself, it's probably just a rare case. But when those rare cases repeated often enough, they became a new rule, and people began to realize the problem wasn't a few bad homes, it was the way the system itself was operating. The first trigger was the cleaning fee. From 2021 to 2024, this fee quietly rose by about 20 to 40%. Like another layer of dust settling each year that no one bothers to wipe away. The paradox is this: Guests had already cleaned up, taken out the trash, washed the towels. Sometimes they were even told to vacuum, yet they were still charged amounts like $250 as if they had just hired a professional cleaning crew. The feeling was no longer paying to rest, but paying to do housework for someone else, a kind of soft exploitation that makes you feel more like a seasonal worker than a traveler. The second trigger was hidden fees. This was the card flip that made a lot of people lose patience. You saw $100 a night, thinking you'd found a bargain, and then at checkout the number jumped to $280 to $300. Service fees, management fees, utility fees, every kind of add-on crawled out like traps hidden under the carpet. It felt like walking into a place advertising cheap tickets, only to learn at the counter there were a whole series of mandatory charges no one mentioned up front. The third trigger was the chore lists and house rules. At some point, Airbnb started turning vacations into a test. Hosts' rulebooks grew as long as dorm regulations, in some cases stretching to 15 to 30 pages, packed with tiny lines of text that made you feel like you were signing a short-term employment contract. Some demands sounded like a joke, yet were written with dead seriousness. Don't set the air conditioning below 25 degrees. Don't shower longer than 10 minutes. You must wash the bed sheets. You must take out the trash at the correct time. You must put everything back in the right place before you leave. Travel is supposed to be for rest, but here you're paying money while living with the feeling of being monitored, being graded, like a tenant afraid of the landlord. The fourth trigger was the attitude of amateur hosts. As the number of hosts exploded, service quality didn't come with it. Many people entered the game after hearing promises of easy income, but they lacked service skills, lacked hospitality standards, and also lacked the responsibility of a real lodging business. The catchphrase, "This isn't a hotel," was used as a shield for everything. Last-minute cancellations, slow replies, showing up unannounced, or disappearing right when guests had a problem. Customers aren't asking for towel swans. They only need one basic thing: respect and a place they can trust. When that basic thing is no longer certain, every beautiful piece of marketing becomes cheap. What matters is that all of these triggers didn't just make Airbnb more expensive. They made Airbnb lose value. Higher prices might still be tolerable if the experience matched, but here it was a bad trade, paying more to get more risk, more chores, and more unease. And that's when the crack was no longer in a few invoices. It was in the user's mind. When you start asking yourself, why am I making this so hard on myself?
And at some point, you stop arguing about whether Airbnb is fun anymore. You start doing something far colder, opening your laptop, opening 2 tabs, and comparing prices like you're checking an electricity bill.
3 days at an Airbnb often lands around $650 to $700, and that's the number after everything has swelled. Service fees, cleaning fees, management fees, every kind of surcharge that makes the final price balloon. 3 days at a 4-star hotel might be only around $350 to $450, and it even includes breakfast. The gap isn't just about money, it's about what the money means. On one side, paying more to step into a high-risk zone, on the other, paying less to buy stability. And they can accept risk if the price is cheap enough, because that's a fair deal. You save money, and in return you accept a few inconveniences. But when the price is high, and the risk is still high, the deal collapses. At that point, choosing Airbnb is no longer smart. It becomes self-inflicted punishment. And Airbnb's risk isn't the kind of risk where the room is a bit small. It's a risk of trust and safety. You're staying in a stranger's home, in a space whose history you can't control. You don't know who's been inside before you, and you don't know what the real inspection and oversight process looks like. People start to fear very specific things: hidden cameras tucked into seemingly harmless objects, physical hazards in the home that aren't handled carefully, blind spots that the photos online will never show you. You end up asking yourself, am I actually safe sleeping here? From here, the Airbnb experience gets redefined in the user's mind, a game of chance. You might hit a great place, a kind host, everything exactly as advertised, and the trip becomes a good memory. But you might also end up with a bad place, a difficult host, an absurd list of rules, or a problem where you don't know who to turn to. Every booking is a roll of the dice, and travel was never meant to make people gamble with sleep. Hotels, by contrast, sell something that sounds boring but is incredibly valuable: stability. You know what you're going to get. There are procedures, staff on duty, clear responsibility. If there's a problem, you go down to the front desk, say one sentence, and they have to fix it because it's their job, not the goodwill of an individual. But with Airbnb, when things go wrong, you enter a different maze: slow support, cumbersome procedures, and refunds that are no longer a simple act of making things right, but a drawn-out negotiation. You don't just lose time, you lose the whole trip, because the hours that should have been for resting turn into hours of texting, sending photos, explaining, waiting for replies. And the scariest part is the feeling of being left hanging. No one takes responsibility immediately, because the system is designed to disperse responsibility. Heading into 2025, the story is no longer a few scattered customer complaints. It turns into a market picture with two opposing colors. Demand is still there, but the easy slice of cake is gone. Anyone who entered the game believing money would just flow in starts to see the machine's teeth. On the demand side, the short-term rental market. July 2025 recorded a record of about 26.4 million room nights, up 3.6% year-over-year according to AirDNA data. But that record doesn't mean everyone wins, because the number of people selling nights rose along with it. AirDNA described June 2025 as having a record number of available listings, while demand growth slowed and occupancy showed signs of slipping. Put bluntly, guests are still traveling, but there are too many hosts, so profits get eroded by the crowding itself. And when profits are already thin and regulation starts tightening, the market immediately shows its bones. New York is the coldest example. Local Law 18 was passed by the city and rolled out a registration mechanism, forcing platforms not to process transactions for unverified listings. The result was published by Airbnb itself in a report. Airbnb listings in New York dropped by about 92% after the rules took effect in September 2023. In the boroughs outside Manhattan alone, they fell from around 17,000 to 1,400. Whether you call that cleaning up or shutting it down, the impact on the model is the same: a direct cut into the urban supply that used to be a goldmine. Next, Los Angeles only allows short-term rental registration for primary residences, and the common registration type is capped at a maximum of 120 days per year. Denver requires a license, and the short-term rental must be the host's primary residence. Chicago requires home-sharing properties to have a registration number to operate short-term rentals, 31 days or less. These rules share one common message: if you want to play, you have to show your face. If you want to make money, you have to take responsibility like a real lodging industry. Right then, Airbnb also drove another knife into the side of its own fee system. Under the one-fee structure, a fee deducted directly from what the host receives, Airbnb says this is typically around 14 to 16%, and from late 2025 it will move many hosts to a 15.5% rate, with effective dates of October 27, 2025 and December 1, 2025, depending on the group. When the deducted share increases, the host's natural reflex is to raise the listed price to make up for it. But raising prices in an already crowded market is like pulling a fire alarm. It only gives guests more reason to turn back to hotels. And if you want to see the future of this crackdown, just look at Europe. Reuters reported that in Ibiza, the number of vacation rentals in 2025 almost fell by half compared to the previous year. And across Spain, short-term rental listings fell by 4% in the second half of 2025. The first time that article noted a nationwide downward trend. When the state steps in, the game is no longer list it and you'll get guests, but list it and see whether you're still allowed to operate. The return of hotels happened quietly, and the number one strength of hotels is stability. It's like a Swiss watch, nothing flashy, but it keeps perfect time. You know what you're going to get: a clean room, fresh towels, a clear process, and a place where, if something goes wrong, someone will take responsibility immediately. That stability may sound boring, but in travel, boring is sometimes luxury. Because no surprises is what actually lets you rest. The second strength is service. Hotels sell the feeling of being taken care of, not a list of tasks. You step out, you come back, and the room is clean. You don't have to take photos as evidence. You don't have to text and plead. You don't have to wonder whether you violated some clause because you turned the air conditioning down a few more degrees. In a hotel, cleaning the room is their job, not your moral obligation. The third strength is practical economic value, the kind people only notice after being ground down by fees for too long. Free breakfast isn't a small perk. For a family, it can save $40 to $70 a day because you don't have to go buy groceries, cook, clean up, and then take out the trash like you're running a temporary rental apartment. Hotels sell you time, and time on a trip is always more expensive than money. The fourth strength is transparency. The displayed price is close to the price you actually pay, with less of that ambushed feeling at the final step. You look at the rate, you book, and you know what you've signed up for. In a world where consumers are sick of fees that swell with every click, transparency becomes a real competitive advantage, not a slogan. The fifth strength is the loyalty ecosystem. Hotels don't just sell you a night's sleep. They sell a long-term relationship. Points, upgrades, free nights, dining vouchers, airport lounges. It's how they turn every spend into a small asset for next time. Airbnb has almost nothing equivalent at the system level, so each booking is usually a one-off transaction, without the feeling of being rewarded or valued over time. And here's the bitter paradox. The worse Airbnb gets, the more free advertising it does for hotels. Every story about hidden fees, every chore list, every last-minute cancellation, every slow support response, all accidentally reminds people that hotels have things that seem old-fashioned but turn out to be precious: responsibility, process, and clarity. Airbnb didn't collapse because its technology became outdated, and it wasn't because the sharing idea naturally went out of style. The first thing that broke was trust. When a platform lives on the promise of living like at home, but the experience makes people tense as if they're taking an exam, then it's no longer a matter of price or app design. It's a moral problem of the model. The system stopped listening to the people paying and started serving the things that are easier to optimize. The lesson here is brutally simple. In hospitality, trust is the currency. You can cut costs, you can shift fees onto someone else, you can make the numbers on the report look nicer. But once customers feel deceived, forced to work, or abandoned when something goes wrong, they'll withdraw that currency from you. And they'll withdraw it in silence. Now the question lies in the future. Can Airbnb come back, or have they gone too far in turning the experience into a casino called booking? If they want to come back, what price will they have to pay? Cutting fees, tightening up hosts, or accepting slower growth in exchange for quality? And what about you? Do you still trust using Airbnb? If you had to choose, would you choose the freedom of a home or the stability of a hotel? And what's your story? Was it a trip like opening a gift, or a trip like opening Pandora's box? If you want investigations like this, where we peel back every glossy layer of these empires and see what's left inside, subscribe to the channel. There's no cheap sensationalism here, only truths cold enough to keep you awake.